Okay, I think we're live, and for a second I'll have the chat up, everybody. If we don't sound okay, let me know in the chat here. Um, I'm here with the second episode of the Lost and Found bin. I'm here with my co-host Chick, and we talk everything under the sun having to do with the Mandela Effect. So how's it going? How's this week go? How did this week go for you?
It went pretty well for me. Thank goodness it was not too crazy and not anything too wild while I'm on my little vacation. So apart from the things I've obviously seen, like you were posting about Andy Warhol and the moon,
Mhm.
that's pretty wild. But I mean, like in my uh, right on front of me, nothing was too crazy in
Mhm.
that capacity.
That whole thing, and I had to break that out on a Thursday afternoon after work. That's how trippy that was when I found the Moon Museum, and that it was so many symbols upon symbols of, it was a wafer. You put the wafer in your mouth, and then it was the Moon Museum, and then it had Andy Warhol with other 60s artistic luminaries on there. It was on the moon. We were talking about moon stuff in terms of the fallen astronaut memorial that's on the moon now. And I just, not to redo the entire episode again, because it was a 10-minute spiel just off the cuff, but it was like, come on, man. I mean, well, what are they going to discover next on the moon? That we had a highway on there or something? It was so bizarre.
It was really bizarre. And like when we were first talking about the astronaut things, I think even before we put it on here, we were joking about what's going to be next, like a museum or something.
Oh, I forgot about that. We sure did, didn't we?
We did. We were like, this is so hilarious. What's next? And then it shows up.
And we were answered, yes, here's what's next, a museum. That's so bizarre. So we were talking earlier, but I wanted to let everybody know that if you follow my Twitter feed, I actually introduced the Mandela Effect to. Thanks, Mike. I introduced the Mandela Effect to a really significant sci-fi author, Jeff Noon. He wrote the book Vert and many other books like Automated Alice, and he's got a series out right now. And I was able to, I'm the person that officially introduced it to Jeff Noon, and I'm pretty proud of myself for that. And hopefully, sometime down the line, I'll be able to talk to him about the Mandela effect. I'm sure now he's he's probably researching it. But his latest round of books are called the Nyquist books, and it's Jeff Noon, so anything he writes is gold as far as I'm concerned. But I just wanted to throw that out there if there's any Twitter followers out there. Anyway,
Very, very cool. Very good work.
thank you. But I would love for other famous people like that or influential people to kind of get involved or to acknowledge the Mandela effect. That would be kind of cool.
That would be amazing if, with a broader reach, if it would spark perhaps the interest of. I was just talking to somebody about like how there were so many more people in 2016 like actively pursuing it, like where you could see it online, and then it started to quiet down again. And it would
Mhm.
be amazing to have influential people say, "Hey, look into this," or research this a bit and see if it doesn't like spark an interest to have a whole wave of people look back into the situation or even reawaken them to the situation.
I think at first there was probably, particularly the time frame we came into this, because it sounds like you and I have talked about this before, that we came in around the same time. I think there was still kind of a fad aspect to it, that it was just this neat and kooky thing, and there was just this surface dusting of the bigger YouTube channels covering it. And I think for the rest of us that remained, it's become something a bit more of a hardened, more solidified scene.
Yeah, and I think that for the people that really saw it and realized it was something more, they couldn't drop it. Whereas for the people that found it more maybe as a novelty, it was fun for a while, but things moved very quickly on the internet, so they moved on to something else.
Yeah. And there's still a lot of channels out there that are very valuable, that look for Mandela effects. But if you stop right there and you don't move on to try to, and a lot of those channels now actually have, they still do the new Mandela effects, but I've noticed almost all of them, the bigger channels, the bigger Emmy channels that do that, they've moved on to some kind of talk or some kind of casual conversation where they can start pondering the more philosophic questions, or the more kind of terrain and the kind of source questions of how did this start, what do you think. So even those channels have moved on to bigger and broader issues about the Mandela effect, and that alone helps everyone out, I think.
Yeah, I think that I think that especially getting to that point of saying, well, what's next is really important, because I've definitely heard people say like, oh, I've looked into all these things and it's just overwhelming, and and I'm like, well, that's not what it should be. It should spark you to think what's next and why. It shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
just be, oh, it's too many things to think about, because then you're not getting past the surface level of it. Then you're just getting overwhelmed, and that does not help.
And and once you get past that, it really is a heightened form of awareness is really what happens. And if you can get through the anxiety and the paranoia and the depression and sort of like Vanessa VA talks about, kind of the five stages of grief. If you can get through all of that, what you end up at the other end of it is this heightened awareness where before you may have shrugged something off, but now everything is being analyzed. And it's actually a better way to live because it's a more aware state of living, I think. That's just me.
I think so too. But I think that's exactly the point, is some people find a more aware state of being really uncomfortable. So they don't want that.
Okay.
Which is, to like people who pursue this stuff seems really crazy and maybe backwards, but there's a lot of
Hmm.
people that their first option isn't, an obsessive quest for the truth. Like the first thing is they got to be comfy and they got to deal with their immediate surroundings all the time. And perhaps that's something to do with how our personalities, or how we're wired to deal with how we perceive information.
Ah, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Actually, I forget, there's that pyramid that, and I forget what it's called, of you first have to get shelter, then immediate safety, and then at the top of the pyramid is kind of self-actualization. And so from psychology, I forget what it was, but I'm sure somebody
Oh,
will.
yeah, the pyramid of needs. I've
Yeah, yeah.
definitely seen that before, where like
Hmm.
the as it was explained to me, it's like if you're at the very bottom of the pyramid, where you're just in desperation for shelter and water and the most basic things, then your mind is not inventing loads of emotional problems. And like when you move up
Hmm.
the pyramid and you have never, you don't have to worry about ever being hungry or anything like that. The mind is a problem solving engine. So then it'll start to create problems within you to solve if you don't have survival things to deal with. And actually you're more likely to be, in a strange way, happier if you're not in that part of the pyramid, because we are still in a way designed for survival. And when that's taken out, a very old part of you kind of doesn't know what to do. It's almost like we're still adapting to the idea of the richer countries, Western society, where those immediate dangers are just not a reality in everyday life.
All right. I looked it up. It's Maslow's hierarchy. I totally forgot about that. But I looked
Maslow's
up,
hierarchy.
yep, survival pyramid. I totally looked that up. So there it is, Maslow's hierarchy. And yes, I agree with you 100% that the once you get to those higher parts of that pyramid, it's just like the Mandela effect itself. It's very much something of you have to be to the point to where you can be that kind of aware, where your awareness can drift from immediately, okay, I'm not going to be shot or blown up. I can, this kind of awareness is, and kind of what I've talked about. Maybe the Mandela effect has always been around. It's just that you have the combination of one, mass safety, and like it's never, the world's never seen before. in terms of maybe like the West and large other swaths of the world, and then us having the combination of that and the internet being able to communicate with one another, you know, whereas before we'd be shut down at the corner store, or we'd be shut down at the barbershop or your church or temple or wherever it may be that you go. Now people like you and I, we can talk to one another freely without worrying about being, shunned from the community, and that may be why the Mandela effect has such a staying power.
At least, yeah, at least within our own circles, like people can actually understand what we're talking about instead of
Mhm.
like how crazy it would be for someone who is just coming into this to like maybe come in on our conversations and like they'd understand a lot of it, but there's some parts of it that would just be real, like I think, like really wild to someone that was just beginning in this whole trying to figure things out quest. But
And with that, what do you think about? Have you given that any more thought about the Mandela effect and perhaps therapists trying to, since we're sort of on this track right now, about therapists trying to, perhaps label it, or, have you given any more thought to that?
well, I have, and I was just like thinking about almost like we were saying about influential people. I'm really hoping that more medical professionals will come in here. Like I've been contacted in the amount of time that I've been doing this by a couple of medical professionals who have to be anonymous because they don't want to lose their job because it's just too crazy, like for the field that they're in, especially to say that anything is different because that affects everything about how they might treat somebody. But
Ooh.
yeah.
What specifically can you talk to us about? You obviously you don't have to mention their name, but anything specific you can tell us about that? That sounds so interesting.
Oh yeah, well they didn't even give me their names, and I didn't, ask for them. I just like I understood like where they were coming from. They just needed to vent and to be believed, not to be laughed at or anything like that. One person was a nurse, and they told me that they were really concerned with this happening to medical professionals because it could be dangerous because you're changing things. So like how can you treat things? But she was talking about there used to be a flap of cartilage behind the nasal behind the cavity there, the nose. So when she would put like a breathing tube up people's noses, it used to be very difficult because that cartilage flap would kind of be in the way and she'd have to be very slow and gentle and everything like that. And then she said one day it just wasn't there.
Mm.
So, and that kind of started her on this quest of like, asking people, well, what about this part? Like, where is it? They're like, we don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean? And that brought her into like, oh my gosh, what is going on?
Oh, that must have been just jarring. And I bet there are so many other medical professionals out there that have the stories. They have to with these changes. I mean, these changes are massive and they keep happening. Our heart moving from the left side of our body to the center. These drill holes that are now in our skull. I mean, come on.
Like, it's the kind of like the one area where you hope the person did get the upload, because if someone's working with the old data, it's not relevant anymore. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh man. And that's just it. In order for them, so we could have just exposed something right now, perhaps that maybe it is the Mandela effect. Everyone gets the download, and even people who get the downloads, it's just a matter of whether or not you got the download or not. You know, and oftentimes we speak of the Mandela effect like people didn't get the download. Well, maybe everybody got the download, and the difference is you've got the download.
I like was thinking those lines for a while, but when you see like some people who are so different, like even you know, in some cases between different where you are, it's difficult to say where we are, but when things change, people's personalities can change and change back and things like that. So you're not even sure if you're dealing with the same exact individual that's just like getting downloads, or is it, like, that's the thing, is you can never really nail down what is happening.
Do you want to hear something scary?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I've noticed it's really been ramping up the last week, but since we had our shift in early March, I can't eat enough Butterfingers. And I don't know if I've ever had one full Butterfinger in mine. I may have had one here or there in my entire life, the candy, the candy bar. But I would say in the last few weeks, I like today, I've had three of them. And
Wow.
yeah, and that's a change with me. Now, that's not a personality change, but it's a craving my body has. And something has changed, and I can't eat enough Butterfingers now. And I don't know what the hell.
Well, food and taste buds and everything have changed for sure. Like I was discussing ages ago with a different channel about how watermelon used to be like sickly sweet and now it's really watery, and different
Mm.
foods that just their tastes have completely changed. And in all honesty, like when I went to the grocery store, everything that I liked before is now gross, and everything that I wasn't that bothered with before now tastes really good.
Okay, so it's happened to you. Okay, so you've noticed even with yours because this is the first time I've noticed now something had changed with me personally, and it kind of freaked me out that I have this un this bottomless pit need for Butterfingers, and I get like right now I want to go eat one right now, and it makes no absolutely no sense to me.
Is it like the flavor for you, or do you like really need the sugar? Because those could be two different things, like change
It
wise.
Yeah, no, I think it's both. I just love the flavor. I love that they get all crusty on my teeth and I have to pick my teeth. I love the whole process. It's almost as if I've always loved everything about it, but I don't have that history. And I'm almost afraid to ask people in my family, "Hey, did I always love Butterfingers?" Because I'm afraid they're going to tell me, "Well, yeah, of course you've loved Butterfingers," because that would be just too much for me to handle.
Well, that's something that we have to be real about. Is while we're moving around, we may be inheriting different backstories, however temporarily.
Mhm.
And I know that's weird because you still completely feel like you, but you're inheriting a different line of things. Like the channel Mandela Effected was showing his family photos are different, taken from different angles. His graduation photos are different. I don't really like have loads of photos, but the photos that I do have seem to be the same. So I thought it didn't affect me. But I'm also like kind of afraid to ask things about, you know, that could be entirely different. But I have stumbled on like small things. Like
Well, even you said right there that the flavors for you have changed. So at a minimum, you've at least gotten to my level of change where you know that things taste different.
they do. And it's like, is that a change in the taste buds, or literally we here in this place like those foods and never like the other foods?
Right, exactly.
Because like for
But I
me
know for
anyway, it's we're our souls, and with the changes, we're unsure if it's changing or we're moving or what the issue is. So we could be inheriting things that are not that we obviously didn't grow up with, which is a super strange thought. But it's like, why would you suddenly now be obsessed with that candy bar? And if somebody in your family tells you, oh, you still eating those candy bars, you've been eating them for years, like you're gonna feel pretty weird and feel pretty freaked
yeah,
out.
that totally flip me out. That would totally because for one thing, I've never been a hard candy kind of person. I've always liked things like bear claws or honey buns or more pastry oriented stuff when I wanted my sweets. And now I have no desire for those anymore. All I want are Butterfingers. That and the other one, the Heath bar. Which is a substitute whenever I can't find the Butterfingers. And I think what also freaked me out was everywhere I'm going now, Butterfingers are starting to sell out. And I don't know if it's because I've never had to deal with a shortage of Butterfinger or if I'm dealing with maybe a whole chunk of the population now becoming Butterfinger addicts. I don't know what the deal is.
It could be like a new like Butterfinger obsession, which congrats to Butterfinger, their sales are going to be through the roof. Or it
Yeah.
could be um, like, well, obviously it could be so many different things, but either inheriting a new habit that isn't new for you here, or it's I'm trying to even think if like maybe you could need the sugar because of the changes. Because I know the
Mm-hmm.
magnesium levels dip, but I'm not sure about the sugar levels or the blood sugar levels.
Right. And I can remember whenever I was a pastry person, after I'd eat, if I ever dared eat a second pastry, I wouldn't feel. I'm not a bone thin person, but I'm kind of a thin person. So if I have too much of one thing, my body tells me to stop, to knock it off. And and with this butter, like today, I've had 3 Butterfingers, and I can't guarantee I won't have 2 more before the day's out.
I hear you. Do you find like I don't know if you've ever had like indigestion or anything like that, but do you find it easier with the stomach off to the side than in the middle?
I've had actually stomach issues to where at my for at least the last 15 years, and I can tell you that my stomach issues have actually, in terms of indigestion, they even had to put a tube down my throat to make sure it wasn't stomach cancer, and I had to do all kinds of really hideous things in order for them to do kinds of checks on me more than a decade ago. And I can tell you that my stomach, the acid reflux I have is a bit stronger. However, I'm able I can tolerate a more wide range of food, and it's very strange for me to have that dichotomy working. That I have to. It's the medicine I take is amoxicillin for my stomach, and I had to heighten the dose of that in order to handle the acid reflux. However, years ago, before the whatever shift happened, there was whole swaths of food that I simply could not even look at or eat, and I couldn't keep it down because my stomach would hurt so bad. All of that is now gone. My stomach is completely changed now. It's more durable. It's very strange.
I wonder how many people that like, obviously are different people, their different body parts are more um prone to things, but I wonder how many people that had issues like with their tummy in the past now have
Mhm.
less issues or find like I find well my issues have been gone for years and years, like since I sorted myself out spiritually. I had major issues, and then when I got saved, I had a miracle healing by Jesus, like that the doctors couldn't explain. They just
Mm.
told me to get out. They didn't even want to talk to me about it. I was like, I don't care as long as I'm well. That's all good.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I
you hear about that
wonder,
a lot. That's common, particularly for people who finally, are saved, and people who finally, you know, heard of, I'm sure not sure you have, and I'm sure the audience has, people's cancers being solved, and I mean, just really dramatic things.
yeah, and you'd think that they would say, oh, great, and be happy for you, but they get mad and they tell you to leave. It's almost like an NPC thing.
Well, hey, chick, you're messing with their materialist point of view, man. You don't even have to be Christian to rock their. I mean, you can just be, someone who's into like the New Age or whatever, and you know that that's the problem with hardcore materialism and the materialist point of view is that it's so fragile. Anything outside of like the scientific method just rocks their world, and that's why atheists are so like just hostile, and they're just not very fun. And no offense to any atheists out there, you're not very fun. And it's just because, anything spiritual will rock their world, and they don't care if it's Christian or otherwise. It just bothers them. So to me personally, that's my opinion about doctors getting wigged out about that.
I think that, if you're your view on everything is set in the material, of course it's going to be rigid and far too rigid for like the things that we're discussing here. Because if your belief is in the material world and you're an atheist, and then the material world is not what it seems, what does that mean
Mhm.
for you? But none of my business because I'm not an atheist. I'm just putting that out there for people, food for thought. Like it's not what it seems.
Well, I was watching Joe Rogan, and he had a musician on called Liz Fair, and she did a lot of albums in the '90s, and maybe some people remember her, some people don't. But the way she talked about it, I like that, and I'm going to adopt that. Most of this spiritual stuff is probably just future science. like telekinesis, like astral projection. Eventually there may be, or even ghosts or whatever. Science and even materialism may end up just explaining that one day. It's just that most people who are hardcore materialists are such followers and yes people that they won't ever dare have the imagination to go, yeah, okay, one day this could be solved. We have to settle for us saying that there's a limitation to science right now and just accept that it hasn't figured it out yet. The problem with scientism and materialism, it always has to have the answer right now to every single thing. And if it doesn't have the answer, then it resorts to mocking you or belittling you.
Yeah, which is not a way to get ahead. Oh, I can hear
No.
myself.
Oops. Are you
There we
okay?
go. Yeah, I thought it was just weird for a minute.
Okay. Okay. But yeah, so that's all that is. It's future science maybe. That's one way to put it, I guess.
Do you still believe in the future? Like
No.
linearly? Because,
No, I
like,
don't.
I'm definitely onto the ever present idea. So I'm kind
Yeah.
of like, I'm not sure about the future anymore. Like, as I used to think about it, you know?
Yeah, but I give people the leeway of them not having the vocabulary or having the training of understanding that linear time is a myth. So when they talk about the future and they talk about something interesting, I give them that leeway and I have that understanding that they have to have a way to express what they're talking about. And then what I do is I take that good idea and then I sort of deconstruct it into what actually reality is, and that and that time itself is nothing more than something we use to measure so we can get labor and money and all kinds of other things out of human beings as well as apply pressure to them. So that's I'm well beyond worrying about the past, the present, and the future. But if someone expresses a really good idea and they haven't gotten to this point yet and understanding that time isn't real in terms of the way you think about it, then I won't be closed minded. I still will be able to understand what they're trying to express, and I'm very forgiving of that.
I hear you. It's like, especially like even in this community with like different things, there's like certain words that we use to just encapsulate quickly like what we're trying to say so that we can put the new idea forward. And like I
Hmm.
do that too, like timelines and realities. And I'll try and preface it and say, I'm not saying for definite that that's what this is, but I'm trying to explain myself like quickly so I can get on to the next point. Because I feel like if I explain the preface and then explain what I'm explaining and then explain that, then everyone will be asleep by the time I get to
Hmm.
whatever it was I was talking about. Because, like you say, this is like a growing vocabulary. Like, it's difficult to just to use the usual phrases to make sense of like how what we're trying to talk about in a simpler way that isn't too like long.
Yeah, it's like a shorthand almost, and certain things, especially if you're really deep like we are in it, you just accept those things as kind of a shorthand just to get across that idea, like you were saying. Totally, I totally get where you're going with that, and I totally understand what you mean.
I was gonna say, I was thinking last night, and it might be just like a totally crazy like line of thought, but I was thinking about, you're saying the possibility that this has been going on for a long, long time, and it could very well be the effect. And I was thinking about how between different parallels, time could move differently. Because I've heard some people talk about that, like that they were saying that things were, world events were 1 year progressed or 1 year regressed from wherever they were from to what's happening right
Hmm.
now, kind of thing. And it made me think about an ancient Irish legend called Oisin and Tir na Nog. There was this warrior called Oisin, and he ended up going to a different land, a land beyond the sea, kind of thing. And when he came back, time had passed completely differently in Ireland from where he was in the different land beyond the sea, Tir na Nog, the land of the young. So it made me think about like different places and how time might be completely different. That was a pretty extreme case, but it just was interesting to think about. He was a member of what they call the Fianna, and those guys were said to be twice as tall as Roman spears. So they were still, way back in the days of the giants. Like we're not even sure like what kind of years we put that in. And when
Uh-huh.
Oisin came back, there were no more giants, and Christianity had come to Ireland, and he was just like freaked out, and he couldn't understand how everything had changed. Because for him it wasn't hundreds of years. For him it was only a while. He came back and there was, I think it was like 300 years had passed and everyone was gone. Like his time was gone and just everything seemed really strange to him. So it's like a relatable kind of story in a weird way, I suppose.
No, that's a really big concept that you just expressed, and it kind of makes me think about, like with Christianity and all the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Um, they're all from pretty much the same source. Of course, they would argue otherwise, but they are from pretty much the same source, and that's a very big point of view, and it's a very big thing to have a linear timeline with most mainstream um, points of view with Christianity and all that, because what will help do is kind of give a perfectly linear timeline so a person can follow it like a story from beginning to end. And it's especially important to the second coming, or as the Hebraic people think will be their first coming. And I'm not exactly sure how Armageddon works in Islam, but it makes sense that time needs to be agreed upon. And I think there's a lot to with that story that you just said, that it's like the slit experiment. If we all agree on what time is, we can actually change the way in which, like the slit experiment, we can change the way in which reality actually works, because our power and our energy and our way of concentration can physically manifest and change the world. And if you're a giant or whatever and you go away and then you come back to a place that's converted, you weren't a part of that. So you become an outsider of that and outside of that belief system. And I think in a lot of ways why people, particularly Christians or people who believe in the linear, they're invested in linear time, why they have a hard time with the Mandela effect. In a lot of ways, it subconsciously, if not consciously, it sort of interrupts that linear time construct in which most of Western civilization is built upon. Because if something can change in the past right now, or if something right now can change the past, or if something in the future can change right now, then it's all happening at once. And if that's the case, then there is no past, present, or future. It's all here and right now. And I've explained it before that instead of going from the past, the present, and the future, you would be going from wherever you're at to Miami, or wherever you're at to Los Angeles, and it would be like a place on a map rather than a time.
Yeah, and like one of the things that I suppose, coming from very like traditional churches and things, perhaps for Christians it's difficult, but for me it's kind of like the opposite thing. It's like one of the whole things is that you believe God can do anything and all of it's possible. So why would it be
Mhm.
impossible for this to be happening? It's not. It's perfectly within what you're saying you believe. But that's one of the issues is like there's a lot of people that are they're comfortable in the churches. They don't see, the Bible changes, things like that. And also they don't want to actually literally believe that these things can happen, are happening, and that there's crazy things happening in today in front of us. And it's like, no, if you're going to choose to be active spiritually, to be active in the spiritual world and forsake the physical world to a much larger degree, obviously you're still living in it, you're in the world but not of the world, then you should be open to spiritual things. And if you're not, then you're kind of confused, in my opinion.
Mm. What do you feel about the debate that seems to be taking place within the Christian Mandela Effect community, of which you're a part of, where the debate seems to be from me, it seems to be that one, the what is considered the word of God, and if the Bible is changing, there's one faction that says that's changing the word of God, so that's either blasphemous or it's not true or it's a great deception. And then there's another faction in a whole series of videos I've watched where they say no, the word of God is with God and with the Father, Son, and Jesus, and that's the word. And the word was even before the Bible, and the Bible itself is just a book that helps people find God, but God and the word of God was spoken into existence, and the word is much bigger. Versus, like I said, the other side is no, the word of God is the Bible. Where do you fall on that debate?
Well, what always used to be said, and I haven't heard it said like here by any like big religious organization, like what they say is Jesus is the word of God, and the Bible like helps you find that. It helps you find that connection, and it opens up as you read it. As in, for a lot of people, if you just go in and try to read it, maybe it won't make sense the first time, but somehow like a key will turn in your mind, and then what's written on the page does actually like reveal itself to you, which makes it so different from any other book that I had ever encountered. Whereas here, I think, I mean, I could be completely wrong, but what we're seeing here is almost like that it's almost like the book is kind of being taken out of the equation for people that can see that it's different now and that it's like sinister different in a lot of changes.
Hmm.
So for those people, it seems to be, well, you need to have faith, as in you've already found him, so you don't need to keep searching for him. Now you have to have faith. And it's just as far as all these things we were expecting, the event and all these different things, it doesn't seem to be happening for us. I mean, the first time that I think it was the first time we started talking about things, I was saying like when I first came here, it felt like being benched, like we were playing football and we were being
Hmm.
benched.
I remember that.
And I think it kind of fits into that, where it feels like perhaps in some crazy way we've been put aside, and maybe that's part of this whole thing. Is the idea is, okay, you already read your Bible, you already found Jesus, like you don't need to keep reading it, you already found him, you're put aside. There's crazy things happening wherever you were, so you can't be there. You just got to chill here until you see whatever the next thing is, because you and I had talked also about how the event like keeps almost happening and then shifting out of reality. A lot
Hmm.
of people heard about the Hawaii crisis, but they didn't hear, on the news that the very next day the exact same thing happened in Japan. There was a huge freak out, incoming missile, and then all of a sudden the missile wasn't there.
Hmm.
So 2 days in a row for the same thing to happen is very crazy. And then the massive, what was it, an 8.2 earthquake that hit Alaska, and there was 10-meter waves and all kinds of crazy things reported, and suddenly the wave wasn't there. No one even got their feet wet. Everything was fine. It just seems like crazy things almost happen and then don't happen. So for us, there's something bigger going on.
So I was talking to a someone I know who is getting his PhD in divinity, and he's going to be a pastor, and he wants to, I think it's like non-denominational. No, wait, maybe no, no, I think it's non-denominational, but I think he's going to be like an evangelical preacher. And he was explaining to me there's a time in the Bible and the end times where the word of God is essentially erased and removed. So the people who want to find the word of God, they're unable to find the word of God, and that was a particular time period. And I'm probably completely butchering this the way he was explaining it to me, because I was talking to him about the Mandela effect, and I showed him the Lamb and the Lion and all of these things, and he was again another one of those where he said he'll have to get back to me, and he seemed a little like it wasn't computing, but I don't think he wanted to admit to me that yes, it looks like it's changed. But anyway, the point is, he was explaining to me that there towards the end there will be people who are thirsting for the word, and that's the way it's described, in that it'll be like being in a desert and you can't find the word. And I didn't want to take it far enough with him to freak him out, but to say, is that potentially the beginning of what the Mandela effect could potentially be for people who never knew God and would be coming to the word, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, and as it steadily changes, they won't know it. I don't know if that's a bit too far, a bit too much, but it's just something that popped that I was thinking about for after I had a conversation with him.
No, that's literally in Revelations. So, there'll be a basically a thirst. Like it's going to be. You said it perfectly. Like it's like a desert. There'll be a thirst for the
Mhm.
word, and it won't be found anywhere.
Mhm.
And I'm
Mhm.
not sure. I'm just not sure where we are in this whole thing because, like I said, there's not just the event. Avoiding us and like moving away the other direction. I don't want it to happen. I'm just saying, like, I'm watching these things, and then people who have contacted me and said that it happened for them, and they woke up here. So I'm not sure why, but we seem to be on pause. We seem to be kind of put aside, and it's kind of difficult to figure out, well, what are we supposed to be doing? Like, apart from what we're doing now on that broader scale of things,
Mhm.
perhaps the event and all this won't come for a long time for us. Or like the Oisin and Tiernan Og thing, if we do go back, is it even going to be the same time or is it going to be a very different time?
Yeah, because as strange as this place is, I know it's a creepiness to it, but there's also a calmness to it. Like we've looked away from where we were before and something there is not right. And even though something's not right here, at least here there's relative calm for now, but it's like a weak or a rickety kind of calmness to it. What do you do you I think we've spoken about this before.
We did, and there's definitely like a really quiet, like a creepy quietness to it. And I think that when people first land in, it's like deafening, and then you kind of get more used to it. Um, I was going to say that for like I'm kind of thinking that there could be, for whatever reason, souls that are supposed to be here for this time, and it could be like the soul insurgency, like we talked about, that maybe it's just needed. But like one of the famous people I was tweeting about that I definitely remember did not make it, but she's here. I had a really interesting article. So that was Malala Yousafzai. Uh,
Mm.
in 2012, she was shot 3 times in the head at point blank range. And for us, she died at that point, and everyone was really upset, and everyone, was going crazy. But here, she wrote an article about after she had woken up that after she was shot, she went into 7 days of dreams, and she didn't know where she was. She was just like kind of her soul, and then she woke up here. So
Wow.
it's pretty powerful. Like thinking about like talking the other week about like people who had crazy NDEs who have contacted me, like people who said, yes, it did happen, but for some reason I'm here. So it's like either you're being put aside here, like it's not your time, or you're needed for something else, or like there's something like really crazy going on here that unfortunately there doesn't seem to be much context for. Like there doesn't seem to be books left behind by people, you know, that came before us. It seems to be just like a blank slate of this happening. Whereas if this has been happening for a long, long time, I would love if would be like published works or something left behind, because it can't be just, you know, now, unless this is a special time, like we were talking about, like the time of the thirst in the land, or the time prequeling the event or away from the event, or it's really strange mental territory.
And I don't understand why it has to be. I mean, you know, we see death, from our point of view when you're living and then that person is gone. We don't know where that person goes. And you can still stay within a traditional Christian framework to think that person could move to a place like this. It's possible. And that they're also with other people as well. Not necessarily a purgatory, but you're in a place where you haven't, the harps and the parting of the clouds and all those things hasn't happened yet. And I've talked about that before. It doesn't. What is it we're expecting when we die? And we don't necessarily have to. What if the world is still constructed very much like it was before? And who created this? It's sort of almost a cultural image that we've created in our head, because it's nowhere else that there's this rule or a set of rules of this is what reality is, and as soon as you die, that's it. You'll know you're dead. Your existence will change completely. You'll see harps and angels with wings and all these other cliches, and maybe it isn't exactly like that in the beginning. It's a progression and a series of steps, and you get deeper and deeper into it as you move along into death. I don't see why that's such a strange and bizarre kind of way of thinking.
I think that just like looking at like my experiences in life and like the people I've known and things like that, and this whole subject is like it seems to be very different for different people. And anyone, like I was talking, on the comment box with somebody the other day who was, commenting on EYA's video and saying, oh, hell isn't real and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, if you go and if you go and work in hospice for a couple of years, or you talk to hospice nurses, they will tell you that you'll start seeing some crazy paranormal things around actual death. Like, you can't just be dry cut and academic about it. It's unfortunately, it's one of the parts of this is like, the joy of like somebody being born and how happy that is. There's also the other end of it, unfortunately, where people leave here. And for some people, it's extremely angelic and, incredible paranormal experience. And for other people, it's really scary and hellish and very frightening. And I've basically like been able to pretty much see both ends of that, unfortunately. So for me, anyways, I've definitely had, even though some might say like, oh, it's why would it be this way and why is it not? It just seems to be that way. As in, like, I've had like a heavenly experience where it was like I was almost there, but I wasn't allowed to stay, and I had to be here and do things. But for anyone that does make it there, it is amazing. Just like floating in it's just seems to be just joy and relaxation and light, and even just sitting there doing nothing, you're just happy. Even if you never did anything else, you're just super duper happy. Happy is a complete understatement, but I'm saying like these things are actually real. But for us, whatever happened and whatever's going on, we're not in our time, we're not in our place. Like Oisin and Tirdanog, we're somewhere. We don't know if like we messed up, like you're saying, like purgatory or something, or if it's just we've been put aside and there's more things to do, and that we're perhaps witnesses for what's going on now, because there's a lot of talk about witnesses at this time. If this is the time of, I'm going to say it is, what else would it be except the word change, like the words changing rather than the word, because Jesus is the word, but having the words change is enough for me to say, yeah, this is the famine, this is the time of not being able to find what you're looking for in scripture anymore. And in which case there are witnesses to torment the illusion and to keep like basically trumpeting the truth. And those people are very hated.
Yeah, and that would make a lot more sense then. And I like the idea of if we are getting into the more kind of traditional biblical end time, and um and every religion has a version of this. At least every single Western religion that I know has a version of this. Then yeah, who says that it's not going to get more and more sort of rickety, and it can be very strange and very tailor-made? And that's another thing too. I think people have a preconceived notion that death or the end of the world or whatever it may be is going to be very uniform. It doesn't need to be uniform. We're talking about God and the highest power in existence that made the smallest molecule or the biggest, the Crab Nebula, for heaven's sakes. We're talking about a being that could tailor make, your experience just for you, and yet you're still able to interact with other souls as well on this plane. And yet I still think wherever we are, it's not where we were at all. I totally believe that. Wherever we're at, whatever this thing is, it's different.
It is. And I've been looking at Enslaved by No Media's YouTube channel again, and I think like he doesn't see this kind of stuff, but he is like he's doing his own kind of research. Like he's awake and he can see that everything is a lot smaller here than they're saying it is, and he's looking at different flight paths and speeds and everything, and seeing, oh wait, it's the world is a lot smaller than they were kind of letting on. And I wonder if he knows like the circumference is like smaller and smaller and smaller, like the stated circumference at any rate, all the time. It's really crazy.
Enslaved by No Media. I'm looking that up. That's great. I'll check that channel out. That's exciting.
Yeah, he's like in a different like roundabout way. He's seeing that things are very artificial and strange around him, and he's like, you know, up in there's lies going on, and what are they and everything. And I'm kind of like, you're seeing it in a totally different way, but you're still seeing it as like the sky is not right, and there's all the flight paths and how slow the airplanes are actually going, and he's able to calculate these different things about how everything's a lot smaller than it's being stated to be. And truly, like for me, the stated circumference was 36,000 miles across the world, and then it was down to 34, and now it's 24,901 miles circumference.
Yeah, and that's the thing about this Mandela effect is a lot more people like this person enslaved by no media, they are probably Mandela affected and they don't know, and the world is changing, and that's why nothing is making sense. And there does seem to be a general trend towards getting the world closer and smaller and more compact. Even entire continents are drifting towards one another. So that would make sense that we would lose 10,000 miles, from 36 to 20. You said 26 now, they're saying?
From 36 to 24.
24, that's right. It was 24. So
Yeah.
it would make all of that makes sense because there's very few trends that I noticed about the Mandela effect other than just the absolute chaos of it and sort of the, like we were talking about, a satanic Seinfeld version of it. There certainly seems to be like this mocking, laughing bizarreness to it, but also there seems to be everything's getting closer. And whether that's literal or figuratively, it's really happening. We're getting kind of pushed together in some strange way.
Yeah, like Michael Musko was like posting on Twitter the other day about how they're saying now on Live Science on their website that the floor of the seabed is actually falling. And I said, well, that sounds like everything's contracting up and the seafloor is like, because the ocean's pushing more together, it's heavier and it's pushing the floor of the ocean down.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah, and there's the especially now that that I think it's the Dutchman's channel for earthquake activity. I'm watching that more and more now, and there is so much activity around all the places that we talked about that are affected by the Mandela effect. That there's so much activity, particularly Papua New Guinea, Australia, all these places, and I'm thinking that as these things drift and move, there could be a real world change to things as it happens.
I mean, I hope so. As in, I hope that it sticks that linearly. But I've seen like so many crazy, like every time the event is about to happen, there's a huge earthquake beside Papua New Guinea, like in that part of the world, and then it just like disappears.
Yeah, definitely. It's
and
all
then,
moving closer.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, do you remember when I'm not sure if you were watching those channels, but there were all these like shadows in the sky of like the planet Wormwood, and then it just disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was there was something that was so crazy close to us. There was actually like a visible shadow in the sky, and the sky was like going crazy. And there was another person that had like gone through, like witnessed that with me, and then all of a sudden it was just like not happening anymore. and nobody was talking about it. And like that person remembered and was like, do you remember? This was it. Like this was the event. Everyone was going bonkers. And then all of a sudden it just wasn't. I was like, yes, but everyone else has forgotten that didn't go down now, or it did go down and we left, or I'm not sure.
I don't remember that. I remember the talk of Nibiru for a long time, and I never saw it, but there were a lot of videos and pictures of that second sun for a while, and I think it was the summer of 2016 when that was getting red hot, and that really scared me because I totally, having a second sun is not something that's very paranormal. It's not very occult. It's just something that perhaps the way in which the rotation was happening, it's absolutely could be something that is just humdrum. We just happen to have noticed it.
Yeah, and it's just so strange to like see things like that and get worried about it and everything, and then it's just not there. Because there's been so, like, I used to be so obsessed with the news and the event and all this kind of stuff because like of all the I'm not going to say hustle and bustle, like all the worry about 2012 and all those kind of things, and then that didn't happen, and then everything since that like didn't happen, or it happened elsewhere. Either it didn't happen or we avoided it. I'm not sure which, kind of, as in we didn't witness it. We witnessed the build up and then it's just not there. So that
Right.
tells me that we have some other role, some other destiny in all this.
And that's another thing too. What really the thing about YouTube for a while, and I think it's tapered off, and I don't know if it's because of the ad apocalypse or what it was. For a while on YouTube, everything was going to be bigger than life. Everything was coming. The end of the world was coming. 2012, whatever it was. YouTube was all about scaring you into thinking a specific date, something major was going to happen. It was going down, and they had 1,000 years worth of artifacts to show you why. And it was all about that for years and years. But since the Mandela effect, I've noticed one, those kinds of things have tapered off, and two, people are making more videos about more subtle things. It's almost like the mood of YouTube has changed. The mood of YouTube has become almost accepting of in a weird way, like you're talking about the enslaved by no media. I'm looking at his channel, and the things he's talking about are more subtle, not a second sun crashing into us or anything major like that. These things are more subtle and smaller in scale.
Yeah, and he's like saying, here's, because he's a far more like scientific guy. He's like, here's, my numbers and here's the stuff, and he shows it on screen. He's like, I don't get why you guys are trolling me so hard. I don't get why you're being so unaccepting of this. Like he doesn't know like the NPC angle yet. Like no matter how well proven it is, no matter how well put together it is, no matter how logical it is, they're going to say shut up and you're an idiot and keep quiet no matter what, because they just do not want that. The goal is to keep everybody snoozing.
Yeah, and the more evidence he puts up that's irrefutable, the harder, like they said, you get the most hits whenever you're over the target. He's going to get hit harder and harder. The same with most of those flat earth channels that give this kind of irrefutable scientific evidence. They get hit the hardest. Heck, some of them get thrown off YouTube. So yeah, that's one thing you can expect. I mean, or if you're completely original. When I was doing my 2012 series, I mean, it was just a nightmare. It was absolutely horrific. I was telling stories where I didn't want to wake up and look at my. I ended up turning off my notifications on my phone because I didn't want to see what people were threatening or what they were saying they were, was happening, and it was just awful. So I feel for the guy. I feel for him. That's for sure.
I hear you. As in, like, my channel was nowhere near that size, but when there was a lot more activity, there was a lot more trolls. So, like,
Yeah.
in 2016 and even early 2017 and everything, there's just trolls everywhere, no matter what you put up, and no matter how reasonable it was, or if you said, hey, I'm just thinking out loud, still everyone would just go absolutely crazy. And I used to just, dread going through the comments and like deleting the really nasty like troll stuff, but I was like, I don't want to leave anything, wretched on the section. So like, I don't want to read your bile. Like, this is so horrible.
And I think it's really cool that we're carving this out because I think the Mandela effect has matured beyond the initial people discovering it and it being a fad. Now it's moving more towards a real kind of movement. No one's always reporting. There isn't a lot of reports on other fringe science as often. Because it's not other fringe science isn't it's not a fad because it's already something that's in our lexicon. It's already something in all of our collective consciousness. And I think the Mandela effect, I think this is moving into that thing. And I think what makes the Mandela effect so much bigger than anything else is that it's something that will explain a lot of gaps in what people's belief systems. It fills in the gaps for a lot of things that people are confused by, or it fills in the gap where a lot of people don't understand. Like that plane going missing from Malaysia. That could have been a Mandela effect shift, and the plane just went missing because it never existed in this reality.
God help us. Like, I would, if that would be, if they could get closure for those people's families, like if the story changed one day, that would be amazing.
Right.
Like the Lindbergh baby and the things we talked about before. Like, it was a mystery forever, and then the past changed, and it's not, or things turned out different here, and it's not a mystery. That's one of the things that hasn't shown up yet, but very well could.
And it does. And how about that plane that suddenly wrecked for no reason over Switzerland, and they were blaming it on CERN? It could have very well been CERN, but it could also have been CERN creating a shift. And with that shift, that plane went down for any number of reasons. And they were talking about how bizarre the crash site was, and it's for a lot. This could end up explaining a lot of things. A lot of things.
Well, if there's a massive like electromagnetic field, um, and the plane like crashes into it, because like when I saw the plane that was just like stuck in midair, it was like magnetic repulsion. Like, it was shaking, but it couldn't move any further. And if the plane somehow like didn't stop in midair and it crashed into that offset um, electrical and magnetic field, then it could have been like hitting something solid, which I know doesn't make sense. But if there's some kind of shifting involved, there's no telling what the density of that might be.
Absolutely, I totally agree. Absolutely. That's totally the case. And I think, like with the old 2012 stuff, in a lot of ways, whether you take it seriously or metaphor or whatever it was just me trying to understand those things that the world is. I expected it to be one way, and just because it's different now, and I understand it in a more nuanced way, that doesn't mean that it's anything bad or anything else. It's just that I've gone to a new level of understanding. And a lot of the New Agers, they talk about this ascension thing. Maybe this is part of that. And we don't have to have necessarily that exact vocabulary, like having an ascended master moving into 5D, but there is a larger awareness in the Mandela effect community that reality isn't what we were. And think about who taught us about reality. When you went to school and I went to school and we were kids, and in the time frame that we went to school, these were hardcore materialists, people who straight up believed in Darwinism and all that. It's a very narrow and rigid, belief system, and any kind of nuanced or personalized system in which reality functions has absolutely no place for the way in which that we were taught what reality is.
Exactly. And people thinking that it's not possible for things to be many things. I'm like, why not? If you believe God can make anything, then why can't things be several things all at the same time? Why
Right.
does everything have to be, oh, it has to be exactly the way that we said it was, and if it's not, then the whole paradigm is just broken. Just like the whole belief system is just broken and everyone just has to freak out. I'm like, no, it doesn't. That's crazy talk. There's no reason to say like, oh, well, maybe these things are different than we thought they were, so therefore everything we believed about God is like wrong or something. I'm like, no, maybe you're just seeing more of the picture than you saw before. That doesn't mean that anything's changed except for you and what you can see.
And that's the thing about scientism. It still has that puritanical absolutism from, like, this old that old 16th century puritanical. It's all or nothing. It's very puritanical in its thinking, and it has to be all or nothing. It's completely rigid. Anything outside of this is it's a religion, and anything outside of this is damnable. And if you're any kind of heretic, you're either ridiculous or you're dangerous. And that's a very puritanical, because a lot of these scientists of this enlightenment were still coming out of a very puritanical age. So they had a very all or nothing state of mind. And that's still to this day with science. And science, by its own rules, then it's proved itself to be invalid. And I give the simple example of an egg. Eggs were bad for you, then they were good for you, then they were bad for you. All of science itself should have been proven that it is invalid just on the case of the eggs. Going back and forth, do they give you cholesterol or do they not give you cholesterol? Smoking cigarettes, they were once, by doctors, they were prescribing cigarettes to people, and now we know that they absolutely kill you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, money and that kind of lobbying in the medical industry does happen, which is horrible. But yes, on the actual scientific basis of stuff, they speak in absolutes. And I'm like, there are so few absolutes. Everything is just is averages and percentages. Like you
Yeah.
could say, well, this happens 90% of the time. So we're going, we mostly suppose that this will be the outcome of, whatever experiment or whatever thing you're doing. But they go, no, that's the absolute. It can't deviate from that. And I'm like, absolutes are so rare. How can you say that everything has an absolute? It's just crazy.
And I love how you'll see it a lot. You'll see it very often where you'll have a scientist, and it's great that they studied in that field for a long period of time, but they use that as a shield to dismiss anyone, and they say immediately, well, because I'm this kind of scientist, and that's why you have to listen to me, and you're ridiculous and I'm not. And that goes back to a lot of the things that I believe. It's a matter of you giving yourself permission to believe in these things, and giving yourself the power to say, I don't care if you're a scientist and you have a PhD from MIT. I don't care if you spent, 30 plus years, studying one particular subject. I'm going to give myself the power in what I believe in, and it's going to be decoupled from what you say I need to believe in, and I'm no longer giving you that authority over me, because the problem is half of what you believe in is political, and then the other half has to do with money. So most of science is still politics and money. It's a new kind of religion. It's almost cliche to even say that nowadays, but no, I'm going to empower myself for, like Neil deGrasse Tyson and whoever else they trot out as the authority to tell you, that to laugh and chuckle and to make you feel ridiculous, that no, I'm going to believe what I believe in because I have a life and I have to die and I have to live, and I just by those very things, that gives me enough authority to make decisions on my own that can be separate from what you believe in. And just because you're a scientist doesn't mean that you get to be the despot of my belief system.
Yeah, and they don't seem to understand like how compartmentalized, even though they're like, so specialized and all this kind of stuff. It's like, okay, you have a degree or 2 degrees. Do you understand that you're in a system where the people who are calling the shots have, are at the 32nd degree or the 33rd degree? Do you
Mhm.
understand that your degrees in a semi-revolution? You're just a little part in a big system, and you play your part, and they teach you exactly what you need to just keep saying to people. They're teaching you your lines. But do you 100% believe what you're looking at? Have you done the experiments yourself? And if you have, do you agree that these things are averages and not absolutes, and things can change? And mostly they're going to say, no, I've studied it and I did the exams. And I'm like, yes, but the exams, the whole system that we have set up is geared towards the people who are useful to this to a, I mean, I don't want to say neo-feudalist system, but basically the people who are the small detail people who don't look at the big picture, who do just follow exactly what it is their little bubble of what they need to be doing is. Because you don't want mavericks and Teslas and people who are just out of bounds, like discovering things that'll mess up, what you've already put down financially. And, they want to control how and when different technologies come out so that they can extract the most money from these things. We've already talked about like clean fuel and alternatives, and how it's easier when you want to make a change socially to blame the public with the old technologies, the old combustion engine, and say, well, it's your fault, the whole place is messed up. And it's like, how did science just stall for, what's it been, 100 years or something? Like, how come there's been nothing that has really come to the front from the combustion engine? And like you said, money and politics and science, it's all wrapped in together.
Exactly. And if you really read any kind of like science news, and if you use any kind of critical thinking, take almost any article and almost anyone, and pay attention to the language that they use. Everything is wrapped in a question, or everything is wrapped in a could be or a should be or anything. Let me, like, just now I typed in science news, astronomy, and the first thing I pull up, and guess what the article says: is the Milky Way getting bigger? The article starts with a question, and it's from it's called Eureka Alert, the global source for science news. And it starts with a question. I'm trying to go through just the first article that I grab, and they start talking about. Let's see here. Here we go. The researchers measured the light in these regions, predominantly originating from young blue stars, and measured their vertical movement. And it says, here it is, based on this, they calculate that galaxies like the Milky Way are growing at around 500 meters per second. You see the way in which they use that? And it's they're saying it's based on a calculation, and they're saying it's somewhere around. They're saying this, but our work shows that at least the visible part of it's slowly increasing, and that could be. And it's just, it's over and over again. If you read any science article with a critical eye, everything's about what could be. Is it this? So really, ultimately, what they're giving you is really, really soft science fiction.
Yeah, well, if everything's completely open-ended and could it be and might it be, then it's not exactly going to be breakthrough stuff, and it's not going to be very offensive politically, like scientism right. Politically.
Absolutely.
Because it was so open-ended that you're not treading on anyone's toes.
Yeah, that's the last thing you need, is the money to the money to dry up because you've made somebody really angry in big pharma or something.
Exactly, and you never know what the next agenda is going to be, so you never know what you need to keep quiet on. So I think that's why everything is super wishy-washy with those things.
Oh, I even love this. Here's a quote. It's always kind of a mystery, Haley says. If there's so many that are supposed to be jammed into the central parsec, light years, why haven't we seen any evidence? Finding 12 was really hard, he admits. And this is talking about black holes. It's unclear how black holes got to their galaxy center. I mean, this is an article. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take this article and I'm going to paste it into the conversation, because if you just read any article, you can go to any article, and all it is peppered. And this is a science article. It's just peppered with more questions. They absolutely have nothing meaningful to say in the article. There's nothing meaningful.
But you know what I found was kind of maybe cute is the wrong word, but kind of how everything is either upside down or inverted or the other side of the mirror. Another kind of slide trolling thing, at least for me, was obviously on the other side, back in the 90s and everything, Stephen Hawking was doing all this breakthrough work on black holes, and they were saying about how light would be bent in black holes because it squeezes down so much that they're not sure that light could even get through it. They think that even there wouldn't be space for that. And then when I got here, they started talking about how on this side there are white holes where the light escapes from the other side.
Come on, are you serious?
Yeah, they're serious. I was like, what? like, what? Yeah, they're like, yes, white holes. That's where the light is coming in from the other side. You see, the black
Oh,
holes on the other side. I was like, oh my gosh, more other side talk.
you got to be kidding me. That
Then,
is that is like Seinfeld. This universe has turned into Seinfeld, man. That's
yeah,
too funny.
in this universe, we have white holes.
White holes. You got
On
to
the
be
other
kidding
side,
me.
they have black holes. Like, they
Right.
have
Of
black holes
course.
here too, but like, still, I found that so hilarious and so like crazy. I was just,
So
my head was going around. I was like, what? How? I've never heard of that before here.
white holes. That's just come on, man. That goes back to the comedic side of this thing, man. There's almost a comedy to it. It's like this dark comedy. It's like this being that we can't quite comprehend, but it's making a joke out of everything.
Yeah, like a really, like you said, dark humor. Like, kind of a really evil Seinfeld, like we were
Yeah.
saying before. Like, you're getting trolled all the time, and it's a little bit coy, and it's a little bit, all these little jabs and all these little things that anyone else wouldn't even pick up on. They'd just be
Oh
like, what are
yeah.
you talking about? Like, you're connecting dots that aren't there. But for like people that have seen these different parts of information, it's like, no, this is a direct, like, trolling.
Oh, totally. And I love this. I threw out Space On. Are you ready for this? This is probably, and probably in parents, the only way dark matter interacts with the ordinary matter. Well, you and I could have wrote that, okay, to space.com, because that's really all they're doing is guessing. This is probably how it happens, you
I mean,
see.
it's probably this and it's probably that. But
Yeah.
also, looking at the rules of here with how quickly everything changes, they
Uh,
probably also would have to say probably because their article is going to be nonsense in, a week or 2 weeks when everything changes all over again.
absolutely. Absolutely. And that goes back to science. It's a contradiction in terms. It demands rigidness and it demands this, but it's all going to change on a dime. All of it'll change. All
Yeah,
of it'll
even
change on a dime.
even the dime, Eisenhower's not on it.
Even the dime. Exactly.
Like,
Gosh.
really.
Oh my gosh. Oh, and I'm seeing all these words if and possibly and probably and
And
you know,
scientists believe that possibly.
believe. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I'm gonna look for white holes. Hold on a minute. In science. I'll try to do
Hmm.
science news. All right. That's where the other end where the
That's like you're on the older end.
well, they're calling it the Milky Way Center is a cornucopia.
That's weird.
Oh, they're calling yeah, they're called white hots. Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's
I,
weird, man.
I've got What is a White Hole by IFL Science. What
I
are white
love it.
holes? Universe Today. Black holes explode into white holes. Huffington Post.
Oh no.
Yeah, crazy stuff.
That is so crazy.
I'm
That
on
is
Ya-
so crazy.
I'm on Yahoo because sometimes you get weirder search results there
Oh,
than
you totally
Google.
do.
Yeah, like the weird stuff that doesn't even show up on Google will just show up there.
Mhm. I love it. Yeah,
Very.
I think Google because they're doing that crackdown thing. I think they're not, their algorithm for search stuff now is very much it's kind of really limited, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but they've openly said that there's some stuff they just want to make harder to find. And I know, like, they said that about political things, but it could be for all kinds of things that they're just like,
Yeah.
they don't want anybody uh, looking into certain things. So it just makes it very difficult to find and buries it under a bunch of, other things to try and pivot away or distract.
Hmm.
Because if the
Hmm.
first couple of search results put you on a different track, then you'll say, oh, maybe I was wrong. Maybe it's something else, if you're not familiar with the subject or if you're not
Yeah.
sure exactly what you're looking for.
I love it. I found it. Black holes might end their lives by transforming into their exact opposite, white holes, that pour all their material that they've ever swallowed into space, says two physicists. And the best part of this is that it's saying may, it might end, it may do this, it might do this. It's just garbage. Everything here is garbage.
I went into image search and I found a super duper crazy picture here from a science magazine from
Okay.
scitechuniverse.com, and it's showing that the dying star and everything, it collapses in on itself, turns into the black hole, and then it shows like event horizon, and at the narrowest point of the event horizon, they're calling it the singularity. Fundamental laws of nature are scrambled, it says, and then it explodes out into the white hole, and it says the afterglow pattern, and then the development of galaxies, planets, and everything else comes out after that, after coming out of the other end of the singularity. So how cyclical is that everything would go into the singularity and then come back out of it and become different things all over again?
That is just, it's like, come on, man, really? And by the way, I found the wiki page for white hole. So,
oh, sweet. Okay.
yeah, it's a wiki, and it says a white hole is a hypothetical region of space-time. I mean, I didn't even bother finishing the sentence because it's a hypothetical region. You and I, we ought to develop our own sort of hypothetical theories on the universe, and so there you go.
There you go. We just need to get some kind of, internet degree, and you and I can have enormous amounts of possibly and what if articles and just be major scientists.
Internet degree.
Hey, yes. Hey, you need a fake degree in science in some specialized part of it, so you can say, I have a degree. When people say,
I say when I start a school, are you kidding me? DIY, man.
Grassroots scientism. You better not question us or we'll go crazy.
And all we have to do is just make up the most ridiculous things, like this thing I'm reading. I swear I'm not kidding. I looked down at the first piece of this, The Origins of the White Hole, and the first thing it said, it should be possible to continue this path. I barely even got into a sentence and it's telling me it should be possible. It should be this. It should be that.
It should be. But what is it? Yeah.
The next line, there is little evidence of white holes, though. They wrote an article on something where there's little evidence of this.
See, that could be a trolling, because they're just putting the idea out there, but they're like, well, we're not actually sure about our evidence, but here's what we're talking about.
Totally.
And it's like, you guys aren't philosophers. Y'all supposed to be scientists. Like, I feel the right to philosophize and go off on wild, mind wanderings, because I'm not saying, oh, I'm a scientist and I know everything. I'm just saying I'm a person who's looking at all this, who has many different ideas. And I never want to say, like, oh, 100% I know what I'm talking about, because nobody does in this whole situation. I just say, well, I've seen this, and I've seen this, and I've seen this, and I draw these conclusions. But I'm open to hearing what anyone has to say, as long as they're not a crazy troll.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, as long as you're sincere at this point, because we're talking about black holes, white holes. We're talking about, I mean, this whole article I'm reading, chick, I'm serious. I feel like it was written by a troll who's just messing with us.
Was it written by Satanic Seinfeld?
It's got to be Satanic Seinfeld. It's got to be Satanic Seinfeld, man. That's what we're dealing with, man. This is so bizarre.
It's so weird.
And it's like, it's almost as if they're like, okay, we need a crazy acronym to go with this. And anything that we describe, it has to have at least 4 other disparate things to connect to it to make sure that everybody is utterly confused.
Exactly. You have to make it as absolutely obscured and bizarre as you possibly can, so nobody knows anything. You're no wiser by the end of the article than you were when you started reading it.
Yeah, you've actually lost ground, and you just,
yes,
you just want to go away and just leave it and give up. And I think that's part of how this is designed, is that it makes it to where you say, these guys, they know what thermal equilibrium is in relation to the Hawking radiation, and since they know that, and they know how thermal equilibrium states, and they know that it's time reversal invariant, hey man, I better back off, because they know all this stuff. And that's what scientism is. That's their version of trust us, the priesthood back in the day going, trust us, God spoke to us, we know what the deal is, and light a candle and it'll be all good. I swear that's what this is a version of.
It reminds me of when things were written in Latin to keep
Yes.
the average people out of the situation, make sure no average people spoke Latin, only the very educated and the important people. And it's almost like that. It's not Latin, but they write things in such a way to make people feel like, oh, I'm just too stupid. I just don't know what they're talking about, but they must have it right. Where it's all baloney, but it's just they're trying to make it so that you won't try and dig through the baloney and call their baloney.
You're right. That's exactly what this is. You just called it. That's a major breakthrough. This is exactly language that they use with the garbage that I read off to you. That's their version of Latin. They've created an entirely different, like I talked about, a language which you've just described. A new version of this is their Latin now, and if you challenge that, they can speak in ways that will make you feel really, really stupid. And just because their other scientific friends are around and they catch half of it, they're gonna go, yeah, absolutely. The quantum theory of equilibrium inside of the Hawking's, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely makes perfect sense.
It's the
Yep, absolutely.
neo-Latin educated circle, quote unquote,
Yeah.
educated or initiated, whatever we want to say. It's like, well, you don't speak Latin, so you can't come to the table and talk. You don't even know what you're talking about.
Yep. Yep.
And
And the scientism has gotten so specialized. You'll get a scientist and they only do one thing for 30 to 35 years. They only study one particle. So they've boxed in each of these scientists there, so they can't even argue any kind of overarching theory of science with any other scientists, because they've all been. It's a perfect system that they're all boxed in, and no one can argue with anyone else because no one knows what anyone else is doing, because they're all concentrating on like one particle or one piece of physics, and they invest 30 years into this theory and
mm-hmm.
tens of millions of dollars from the university, and they don't want to talk about anything else, but they do know Latin or Neo-Latin.
Yes, they speak the Neo-Latin, but
Yep.
compartmentalization is absolutely necessary to keep a structure like this standing, because you don't want people that look at the big picture. Again, you want specialists and compartmentalized specialists that only look at their own, what they're looking at, what they've decided to do. Because if you start looking at the big picture, you'll start drawing bigger conclusions, and that's really not wanted. That'll upset the apple cart.
Yeah. And if you start drawing these conclusions and you start pulling away and you really overcome the fear of that language and you give yourself permission, you realize what they're saying is mostly gibberish.
Yeah, you get, if you do speak Neo-Latin and you say, hey, you know what, this is crazy, or you see what's going on, then you just get blacklisted, you lose your funding, and people say you're a quack and all these different things. Like, there have been people that speak the Neo-Latin that have been ousted, excommunicated, because they've been looking farther afield than their specialized area.
Shoot, there's people who's questioned this enough and they ended up, gone, like gone, gone.
Gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the even more extreme, scarier part of it. Yes.
Yes. If you're part of that scientism that's closer to commerce, like you're closer to I'm not going to point out any company because I don't want to get pulled off of
Yeah.
YouTube. But if you're anywhere near commerce and your science has anything to do with money, yeah, you're really walking a tightrope. And if you blow that whistle, you better have a one-way ticket out of whatever country you're making very upset. You better get out of there.
I was going to say the other crazy thing that somebody commented to me that really made me think was the not just the CERN project, but the HARP project, which we thought was for weather and studying the ionosphere and all these different things
Oh,
up in
sure.
Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
There's now an Alaskan Bermuda Triangle right over where that HARP station is. It's smack bang in the middle of it.
Now imagine that.
If you look up Alaskan Bermuda Triangle, it's actually a massive triangle. And from the studying I've been doing of it, there's magnetic anomalies that cause compasses to be up to 30 degrees off. People report ringing and buzzing in their ears, like the ear ringing. people and planes go missing without a trace. And it says since 1988, on average, one person a month has gone missing. No trace, disappear.
Wow. Really?
So you could, that the argument point, because there's always one drop of doubt in these things, so that trolls and people can go crazy. They're like, oh well, Alaska, the wilderness, and all this kind of stuff. But a lot of this, a lot of the Alaskan Bermuda Triangle is in southern Alaska, and even stretches down to the part of Alaska that's taking up the western coast of Canada now. So it's not like all of it is in the absolute far reaches where people just get lost. Like there are a lot of places here where you would think that people could be found, or their bodies could be found, or the plane wreckage could be found, but it says people, there's something crazy magnetic anomaly and compasses are just spinning around and everything just goes missing.
So are you thinking, yeah, I'm reading up about it, and it says it should be noted that it's within the triangle itself is within the heart facility. I'm reading it right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this did not exist for me before, and now like 2 congressmen went missing in this thing and all kinds of stuff. And I think I think it was 2 congressmen. I was going to say a senator as well, but there's like all kinds of people have gone missing in here without a trace. And for us, obviously, the Bermuda Triangle was Bermuda. No one ever talked about the Alaskan Bermuda Triangle. People had talked about, going to the very far reaches of Alaska and maybe freezing to death or getting lost or something like that. But never before this have I heard of the Alaskan Bermuda Triangle, but it's a thing now.
Oh, this is terrifying. They're calling it the land of disappearance. This is
Yeah.
this is awful.
So just like for us, the ear ringing and then they disappear and then they're gone.
Holy smokes. Yeah, and that's the thing with me too. This week, my ear ringing has just gone into overdrive again. I went a couple weeks where I was okay, but between the ear ringing and the love of candy bars, specifically Butterfingers, the ear ringing, and I'm starting to see repeating numbers again. So I don't know if we're getting ready for another shift or what, but something's going to happen soon. I know that. And the thing about a shift is it doesn't become apparent until at least for me, it doesn't become apparent until days and days after it's already happened. And I know with this last one, the most significant thing is that suddenly the moon has become sort of an art mecca. That's the biggest thing that I've noticed.
Yes, and it's like you said, it's like you're not sure until you see all the after effects exactly how severe of a difference it is.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, all you can do is feel trolled by it. Like we don't have the power to change anything back or anything.
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah, and this Mandela effect, I think it's conscious. I think it's conscious of us, and you're right. I think it is a kind of trollish, like kind of attitude towards us, towards the affected. And I was wondering, I wanted to ask you, this Alaska Bermuda Triangle, did you notice it pre early March, or was it post this last shift? When did you notice this thing?
The last shift where Canada, where the Hudson Bay went crazy, that's when this came in.
Okay, so that was like early March then, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, so then this is still part of that. So the moon suddenly is becoming art mecca, and we now have a Bermuda Triangle in Alaska, and the Hudson Bay suddenly wants to swallow up Canada. Canada's much smaller, and you know Australia and that whole era in New Papua New Guinea literally keeps dancing, moving.
Yeah, Australia is below. It's directly below Japan, and a whole bunch of it is under China now. It's like way over from where it should be.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yes.
gosh. Yep. Gosh, what is going on? I'm still waiting to see if the Panama Canal goes back to east to west. That will be interesting to notice.
Oh my gosh, might give us some nostalgia.
Right. Because it's north to south for those that don't, I know but maybe some people in the in the air in the hey, how's it going, everybody? Yes, Butterfingers, absolutely. We are waking up or here. If the earring, then it's gone reported because it's gone so couldn't report it. If you understand me, I'm just reading some of this. Hey, Hey guys, there's 5 oceans now. There used to be 3. I didn't know that. I didn't know how many. I knew there were pre preliminal. Hope I'm always saying that right. I'm always trying to say that. Did you know anything about the oceans, chick?
What was that? The number of the oceans, or
Yeah, there's
I'm
5
sorry.
now, and yeah, and preliminal. You
Yes.
said there.
So for us, when South America was like, bye y'all, going to Europe, bye, um, that cut the Atlantic Ocean in the middle, and we ended up with the North Atlantic Ocean and the South Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, oh
Hmm.
gosh.
Yeah, because
Oh
it's only
man.
like 1,600 miles between Africa and South America, so there's two oceans now.
Oh my gosh. I was just reading some of these, so that's some people are finding the fingers thing pretty funny. I mean, I guess it is kind of benign. So it's much better than growing a second head or something, or we end up doing something completely wild. So I suppose it could be worse.
I mean, it could be. I mean, thank goodness it's Butterfingers, and like you said, not something completely out of the box or completely insane. Like the
Oh yeah,
Butterfingers are like manageable.
yeah. I'm not running around going, I could really use some crack. So I mean, there is that.
Thank God! Oh my gosh!
Right, right. I mean, it's relatively benign, so you're right. It's could be much worse than it is. So,
Yeah, like
and
some people get really jarring stuff. Like some people wake up in a different career or a
mhm,
different marriage, or even they have
yeah,
different children, and they don't, those people don't come forward because they don't want to be called, completely insane. But it does happen. And they like
yeah.
anonymously say like, "I'm really scared right now. This is really weird."
And I think it was like Bluebeard. He ended up going into something like that where he lost and then found his children, and his shifts were just, and that's why it goes back to that customized. I think the shifts are universal and they're sort of customized at the same time. And he had a shift where his family, the composition of his family changed, and then it went back, and then it went back again. It's pretty harrowing if you've ever heard of any of his stuff.
Yeah, like he had his original, amount of kids, and then when he came here, a bunch of those kids hadn't been born at all, and then he got to go back on a short visit, so he got to see them again and say goodbye and give them hugs and everything. And in that place, they called the 2 million people that disappeared the raptured.
Oh gosh.
They
That's
said the governments couldn't keep it under control. They couldn't keep it quiet. There was too many people just gone, and people remembered they were gone. So that was the difference. Like when I got to visit back, no one remembered. No one batted an eye. Didn't matter. I was the only one that had noticed that this. Nobody said, "Where were you?"
interesting.
But for him, people knew. They were like, "Oh my gosh, you're back here! Oh my gosh!" And it was like a totally different situation. But then he got pulled back here, but at least he knows they're okay, and they're
Yeah.
whatever's going on, they're alive.
Yep. That's right. That's right. Eric Kraft, does anyone think near-death experience is a commonality of the Mandela affected? Yeah, Eric, I think it's I think what Chick would, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but wouldn't you agree? We've talked about this and covered it that, yeah, I think it's a fairly common thing.
Yeah, and I was saying about like different people that maybe it was a good junction point to bring them here. And
Mhm.
there's this like show that is barely anything to do with what we're talking about, but on Netflix called Travelers, where at the point that someone was going to die, they can bring a different soul into that person, and it's
That,
almost like an opposite thing where they at the point where you were going to sign off, they can just reassign you, like yank your soul to elsewhere and put you where they need to put you for the moment.
I totally, you brought that up and I started watching it. I'm on episode 3.
It's very interesting.
It's crazy. It's crazy interesting. And prelim, thank you for that. That I can just use a short for that. I appreciate that. Prelim is one of the more uh, he, she, I don't know who, but this person is very attuned to what's going on with the channel. So I like having prelim around. So thank you for letting me shorten your name like that. I appreciate it. But yes, back to the show. I found it incredibly interesting, and it's very on time, and it's very much it very much has to do with a lot. It's almost like that person was Mandela affected. The writers, like they understood.
Yeah, and they put it in like a science fiction way, but they brought in like the future and all these kind of different elements, the AI, the director, all this kind of, like crazy different things, but gave it a really like science fiction twist. So it was quite interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Okay, so you wanna call it? I mean, we're well over the hour, and we're somewhere approaching the 2 hour.
We're approaching that 2 hour because it goes really really fast. There
Goes
always
super
seems to
fast.
be way more stuff to like say.
Heck yeah, because it's just never ending, and every week there's something different. But I'm jonesing for a Butterfinger.
Okay, there's no way I can keep you from them
I,
Butterfinger.
I gotta go, man. I think I'm gonna start taking pictures of them and putting them on my Twitter feed, man.
The
Telling you.
12 o'clock Butterfinger,
My,
the 3 o'clock Butterfinger.
gosh, I'm gonna have to start keeping some in my desk drawer. Start keeping some at work. Put them in my backpack.
Oh, I hope you don't fill your entire life with Butterfingers, and then the
Mm,
next shift you're like, I don't like Butterfingers.
can't stand Butterfingers. Buy stock in whatever company or whatever. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, okay, cool. So, I guess we can shut it down, and I'll talk to you in a couple days. And oh, and by the way, next week I'm going to be out. I'm on vacation. So, um, did you caught that message, right?
Yeah, I got that one.
All right, cool. So, hey, everybody, next week, certainly check out Chick's channel and go hang over there. I'm going to be out for most of next week. And episode 3 of the Lost and Found Bin, it will probably skip next Saturday. However, we will be back with another riveting episode on the 21st by my calendar. But the 14th, I will be out of town. And I may be sending some random pictures in my Twitter feed, but I won't be doing any videos. Probably the latest one I'll be able to do is probably Tuesday this week, and then I'll go dark for until that next Tuesday. So that's it for me, everybody. Chick, anything else you want to throw in there?
No, I think we covered loads of really good things. I did see somebody wants us to talk about NPCs, so maybe next time we'll do a section on that.
Okay, absolutely. That sounds great. That's a great section, and that'll be sort of the glue that kind of pulls all of this together sometimes, because NPCs explain a lot.
Yes, and they're like a really another not just trolling but extremely interesting aspect to all this.
Mm-hmm.
So I find it like fascinating and strange and all these different kinds of things. So I'd love to, yeah, to explore that. And I'll try and have like a couple of notes and things put together for it.
Okay, excellent. All right, everybody. Well, I'll talk to you guys in a week or two. Thanks, everybody.